So I was asked to talk about what kind of skill sets are going to be relevant in today's AI-driven and transformative world, where companies would like to hire people with expertise in AI. So the way I think about this is there's sort of three layers of skill sets that people need to actually develop or upskill themselves. The first is what are known as data engineering skills. Data engineering is essentially this idea that one needs to have the ability to clean and process and transform and curate real-world data sets that tend to be very noisy, and they tend to be very dirty, they tend to be unclean, they tend to have a variety of problems such as missing observations or missing variables, etc. The second layer of skills is once you have taken the effort to clean up those data sets, you should have the ability ideally to do 4 different kinds of analytics, right? The first is called descriptive analytics, in which you're trying to understand what has happened so far. The second is called prescriptive analytics, in which you're trying to understand what will happen next. The third is called causal inference or causal analytics, in which you're trying to understand why something happened. And the fourth is known as prescriptive, in which you're trying to understand what should we do next in terms of the organization decision making. So these 4 layers, these 4 skill sets are going to be layered on top of the data engineering skill set. And the last set of skills is what I call storytelling. Your ability to tell the story. What are the right questions to ask? What are the ways to think about them critically? How do you often have to make judgment decisions on top of the data-driven decisions? Okay. A good source for all of this is a new book that my co-author Ravi Bapna and I published recently. It is called Thrive, Maximizing Wellbeing in the Age of AI. And the framework in that book is called the House of AI Framework, which is now being adopted by dozens of companies all over the world. I myself have worked with more than 60 companies in more than a dozen industries in many different countries. And it is a pretty promising and potentially a highly valuable framework to adopt. Another topic that I was asked to talk about some of the myths of AI, or maybe the myths of generative AI, right? So one sort of myth that I really have seen and we like to demystify and debug is that AI is all about technical skills, or adopting AI or making your organization an AI-driven company is all about hiring the technical people only. Unfortunately, that's a myth. You need a good blend of strategic leaders who understand the broader ramifications of artificial intelligence, as well as the people who are more tactical. Okay, so it's not just purely technical or tactical decision making. You also have to move up the value chain and think about the broader perspective in a more strategic, holistic way. And that's an important message that I'd like to convey to C-suite and some of the senior executives and leaders in the industry, that when you think about hiring, you have to think about blending both the tactical and the strategic aspects. Another interesting topic is this question of why do some organizations fail to implement their AI projects, right? In other words, what are some common mistakes companies often make? Obviously, there's many kinds, but the one kind that I've seen the most, perhaps the most common one, is this notion that organizations who write on day one, they try to boil the ocean. In other words, they go for a moonshot project when thinking about AI-driven transformation or AI adoption, in which multiple feathers are ruffled at the same time and multiple organizational, cross-functional units are being disrupted at the same time. And I personally have seen very little success with that, massive overhaul strategy. Rather, I would say start small. Start with smaller pilots. For example, if you are trying to understand the causal inference pillar of artificial intelligence, right? Why is something happening? Don't try to boil the ocean and recommend this massive, large size, randomized control experiment, but rather start with something smaller, something that's feasible, something that has a lower probability of either annoying your customers or ruffling feathers in the organization, for example. So a simple A/B test can be a pretty good way to get started on the causal journey. Once you get meaningful results, once you understand the implications of those interventions, then sure, you can expand that into a larger randomized control experiment. But we often, face headwinds when trying to start too big, too early. Okay, and so the messaging here is, don't aim for the moonshot on day one. Aim for something, just aim for hitting the rooftop, not the sky. Okay, thank you. Another interesting topic or question that has come up is, how do organizations balance between intuition and analytics, right? And should organizations balance between the two? And the answer, in my opinion, is a resounding yes. They need to do a balancing act between purely data-driven decisions as well as decisions that sometimes originate from intuition or gut and then later are corroborated by data-driven decisions using modern technologies from artificial intelligence. Okay? And the reason is, human intuition is still a very, very powerful tool. It's a very powerful skill set. Human judgment and critical decision-making abilities that often stem from our intuition and gut should not be discarded. Despite being AI heavy and despite being big believers in data-driven decision-making and analytics, one of the things that I've learned over the last 25 years of working with 50 or 60 companies at this point is there is significant value to originating the questions and coming up with original hypotheses using your intuition, using your domain expertise, or using your gut. And then later on, based on the skill sets that you or your organizations have, you can then corroborate or verify or nullify, some of the gut-driven decision-making or intuition-driven decision-making. So, algorithms are great, obviously, but it's not a bad idea at all. In fact, I would encourage people and companies, as I've done with dozens of C-suite people and senior leaders across the world, that there is significant value in relying on initial gut and intuition-driven decision-making before you unleash the full power of artificial intelligence, okay? These things need to be done step by step.